Welcome to the second part of lecture 5, where we are going to introduce the idea of unsupervised learning. So the lecture objectives are just introducing the basics of unsupervised learning, which will be required for our case study in lecture 6, which will be right after lunch. So in this very short lecture, we are going to focus on k-means algorithm and its interpretation. If we have time, we'll also introduce the Gaussian mixture model, which will be useful for the density estimation, other related topics that we'll be covering in lecture 7. Okay. So unsupervised learning, we already discussed this very briefly in the first lecture, right? As we discussed there. In this case, we are given unlabeled data set, right? So using the same notation as previous lectures, so this unlabeled data set will be represented by X. So this is basically just containing the vectors of features which represent examples now in our data set, right? But those data points that we have, they do not have any corresponding supervising outputs or labels, right? There is no Y corresponding to each X, which is the main difference between unsupervised learning and supervised learning, right? Now, the learning problem, if you think about it, is not as concretely defined as the supervised learning case. So in supervised learning, we knew that there is this input X, there is output Y. Sure, we don't know what the mapping is, but we sort of know what the right answer is, right? That was Y. But we don't have a similar notion in this case. So quite obviously, then the type of questions we ask in unsupervised learning are also going to be different from the questions we ask in supervised learning, right? So the examples of the type of questions or type of tasks we do in unsupervised learning are clustering, which is the topic of this short lecture, dimensionality reduction, density estimation, which will be the topic of lecture 7. Throughout this discussion of unsupervised learning, I will be primarily following Kevin Murphy's book, Machine Learning, a Probabilistic Perspective. So if you want to follow up on this and read more about it, I think that would be the pretty much maybe the best reference to follow. So let's start with perhaps the most popular clustering algorithm called the k-means algorithm. I'm pretty sure almost all of you would have heard about this, right? And let me introduce the idea, and then we'll go into some interpretations, one interpretation today and one in lecture 7. As the name suggests, right, the idea is to cluster similar samples or cluster similar objects, right? That's the objective of clustering. Now, if that is what we want to do, we have to define what similarity means, right? In Euclidean spaces, that similarity is nothing but the distance between, say, two points, right? Your Euclidean distance, it could be L1 distance, but we can visualize what similarity means when we are working in the Euclidean domain. So in this specific lecture, we will be using squared distance, right, as our metric. But in the case study in lecture 6, we'll be working on a non-Euclidean space. So as we'll see, we'll have to be a little bit more careful in how we define distances there, right? So throughout this lecture, we will be assuming that K, which is the number of clusters, is given to us. And that will also be the case in lecture 6, because of a specific problem setting, we will be having this limitation on the capacity of a feedback channel that will basically give us this value of K, right? But it is interesting sort of discussion also as to how you determine the value of K. We won't be doing that here, but if somebody is interested, we can always discuss that offline. Okay. Now, initially, we are going to consider hard assignment, meaning each point in your data set is assigned to one cluster, right? We will also generalize this to the so-called soft assignment or probabilistic assignment when we introduce mixture models, either later today or in lecture 7. Okay. Let's very quickly look at the procedure of k-means, right? What exactly is k-means algorithm trying to do? Once you understand the procedure, then we will go into the interpretation of what it is really trying to do, right? In terms of, for example, is there an objective function we can define which it is trying to minimize in a certain way? Okay. So first, the procedure. For a given k, right, as I said, we assume that we are given the number of clusters k. We initialize the centers of k clusters. So this initialization could be completely random, where you select k clusters, say, in your area of interest or the region of interest, just say uniformly at random, right? Then assign each point of the data set to its closest cluster center. Right? So you look at each data point, see which is the closest cluster center to it, and just assign that point to that cluster center. After you do this for all points, then you look at each cluster and see which points are assigned to it. And then you use those points to compute the centroid, which is then used as the new center of that cluster. It will be clear from a picture. So you look at all the points assigned to a cluster, compute the centroid using those points, and call that as your new center, right? Now we keep on doing this, right, until there is no change in the assignment, right? No change in the assignment, meaning one point is not moving from, say, one cluster to another, right? So which means that the algorithm has converged. Now, as we'll see shortly, I first will show you a picture as to what exactly is this k-means algorithm doing. We'll also see very shortly that k-means can be interpreted as an approximate solution to some specific objective function. So we'll do that in a minute. First, just a picture representing different steps, right? How exactly is it working? This picture is from ISL. On this top left, this is what your data would look like, right? In unsupervised learning, there are no samples. These are just data points. In step one, in ISL, they are initializing in a slightly different way. Instead of selecting cluster centers at random, what they did is they are assigning each point uniformly at random to one of the clusters, right? So in this case, they are selecting 3 clusters, k equals to 3. So each point will be assigned to a given cluster, say, for example, yellow cluster with probability 1/3, right? Then the next, so that was the step one. Then in the step after that, they are computing the centroids based on the points that are assigned to a given cluster. For example, if you look at this yellow point here, this is the centroid computed using the points that are assigned to the yellow cluster. And you notice that all these centroids, or the new cluster centers, right, they are located very close to each other because of the way this problem was initialized, right, the random initialization. So after that, after you have these centroids, right, then you do this assignment step, which is to assign all the points to their closest cluster centers. Now you'll see that all the points located here are sort of assigned to this yellow centroid, right, because they're closest to that yellow centroid. Then you have this green centroid here, and likewise, right? So after that, what you do is you have this new assignment. Now, based on this new assignment, you compute the new cluster center. So your new cluster centers are here, right? Your new centroids are here. And then this is what your final step or final result would look like. So you've obtained 3 fairly distinct clusters, if you will, right? So this is how k-means works, right? Sort of the procedural view of k-means. Now, let's also see, can we sort of make sense of what it is doing, right? So in order to do that, I will be introducing some variables, some parameters, just to pose the problem a little bit more formally, right? So I'm given k clusters. I have data set X containing data points X1, X2, so on up to Xn, right? So I'm again assuming, as before, I have n examples. And then the parameters that need to be estimated, right? I have two sets of parameters. I have cluster centers, mu j, right? Uh, so one cluster center corresponding to one cluster. So I have k of these parameters that I'm estimating. Then I have assignment of points to clusters. So I have one assignment variable corresponding to each point, and that assignment variable will be ci, right? Mu j, set of mu j, and set of ci. Right? So we can also define, for notational simplicity, as we'll see, you can define the equivalent assignment parameter as aij, right? Where I runs from 1 to n. I is the index corresponding to your data points. J runs from 1 to k. So j is the index corresponding to your clusters, right? So aij will be 1 if the ith point is assigned to the jth cluster, and 0 otherwise. And we note here that each point can be assigned to only one cluster, and we'll be generalizing that later. Now, using this notation, the assignment step can be written as follows. It is nothing but ci, right, which is the assignment for the ith point, is nothing but argmin of your distance metric that we have chosen, right? So xi is your point, and mu j is the cluster center of the jth cluster. And this term here is nothing but the squared distance between the two, between the point and the cluster center. And argmin is basically looking at all possible cluster centers and picking up the one that is closest, right? So that's the assignment step. In the recentering step, we assume that the assignments are already done, right? So we just need to compute the centroid, which is done as follows. So using this other assignment parameter aij, so this is nothing but sum over xi for all the points that are assigned to cluster j, right? aij will be 0, 1, right? Will be only 1 when a point is assigned to that cluster, in this case, cluster j. And in the denominator, this is nothing but the total number of points which are assigned to cluster j, right? So this is basically just taking the mean, which in this case would be computing the centroid. Okay, so now let's try to interpret, right, these two steps that I have written. Can I recover these two steps from some type of objective function, right? Can I relate it to some type of objective function? And the answer is yes. It can be argued that the k-means clustering algorithm, which I just described, it is approximately minimizing the objective function that is given here. So this objective function, let's try to understand what it is. So I have my data point xi. Mu ci is the cluster center to which this data point is assigned, right? Xi is assigned to cluster ci. Mu ci is the center of that cluster, right? So this term is just computing the distance between the two, right? Or square distance between the point and the cluster and its associated cluster center. And this whole objective function is basically just computing the average distance for all the points, right? Or across the whole data set. Now, it is useful to actually think of this objective function in terms of, say, data compression or quantization, right? What do I mean by that? And this will also be extremely relevant for, by the way, lecture 6. So in these type of data compression or quantization applications, what we do is, let's say if this is your cluster, right? These are your points xi. And let's say that these are all assigned to this cluster center, which is a square, right? What we do in these type of applications is we actually replace the value of each of these points, right, by this cluster center value. Or in other words, we are mapping all these points onto this cluster center, right? So the closer these points are to the cluster center, better our compression or better our quantization performance will be, right? And the farther these points are, will have more distortion. So you can think of this term as a distortion term as well, as we'll see in lecture 6, right? Now, if you interpret this term as a distortion term, then you can start thinking about this objective function here as the average distortion over the data set. And if k-means is indeed minimizing this average distortion, that's a pretty meaningful thing to do, right? So after this, let's see now, can we make this connection a little bit more concrete? Is k-means really doing this? So for that, let's look at a coordinate gradient descent, right? An approximate algorithm or an algorithm that will provide approximate solution to this objective function, right? So in coordinate descent, what we do is, if we have two different sets of parameters, we hold the values of one set constant, right? And we optimize over the other. And then we set the values of this second set of parameters constant to this new optimal values, and we optimize the first, and then we do this process iteratively until we converge, right? That is coordinate gradient descent. You can sort of see in k-means, we were sort of doing the same thing, right? We were fixing the cluster centers, we are doing the assignment step, then we are fixing the assignments and finding the cluster centers, right? So we are sort of going towards that using this coordinate gradient descent on the objective function that we just wrote. Okay, so let's look at this in a little bit more detail. So in the first step, we are going to fix the cluster centers, right? Your mu j's, which are cluster centers, are fixed, and we are going to determine optimal assignments, right? So the problem reduces to minimizing over Ci, right? This is our objective function, assuming that your cluster centers are fixed. So we know where our clusters are, right? Now, if you look at this carefully, you can actually deduce quite easily that if you are minimizing over Ci, that reduces to minimizing each of these terms within this summation separately, right? Because each term depends on one Ci, right? So if we just select the corresponding Ci that minimizes that specific term, right, that will also minimize the whole summation as well. So we can take basically this minimization inside the summation and take the minimization just with respect to that specific term, which reduces our optimization to this step here. And this is nothing but the assignment step, right? You are finding the cluster center that minimizes the distance, which was exactly our assignment step. Let's look at now the sort of the other way, right? Where we fix the assignments and we optimize over mu j. Pretty much the same thing happens there. I'm writing this slightly differently, where I'm using this assignment parameter aij, the other parameter that I had already defined. And because of that, I have to also include this summation over j, right? Nothing changes because for a given I, right, only one of these terms is going to be 1, because we are doing this hard assignment where each point will be assigned to exactly one cluster. Now, using exactly the same argument as before, right? So this term depends only on mu j, right? It doesn't really depend on the other cluster centers. It just depends on mu j. So I can take this minimization only over mu j inside this summation over j, right? And if you think about it, I'm not going to go into too many details here. This is basically the centroid step. So this, if you do this minimization, you actually get the centroid of the points which are assigned to a specific cluster, right? So it's not that difficult to show that k-means is approximately minimizing the distortion introduced, where in this case, the distortion was measured by the square distance, right? And I'll say a little bit more about this in lecture 7 as well. So on that note, if we have to understand the shortcomings of k-means, right, or the implicit assumptions made about the clusters, in the same spirit as we did for logistic regression or for linear regression, right, using the probabilistic models, we sort of understand what are the implicit assumptions being made. If we want to do the same thing for k-means, we will have to introduce Gaussian mixture models, which is our next topic, right? This will also naturally lead us to the ideas of soft assignments, density estimation, expectation maximization, which will all be covered in lecture 7. All right. So let's quickly look at the Gaussian mixture model. So in order to describe a Gaussian mixture model, we first need to introduce a latent variable. Okay, so this latent variable is going to be important. In fact, let me highlight this because this is something that is going to make our life pretty hard when we do this density estimation. It is because of the presence of this latent variable, as we'll see, things get a little bit complicated, right? We'll see how to handle that in lecture 7. Now, so what this latent variable in this context is doing for us is it is giving us the probability with which a given point was sampled from a specific Gaussian. Okay, so this index here I corresponds to the ith sample. So we have one latent variable corresponding to each sample. Okay, so this latent variable will take so it's basically an index, right? Index of the Gaussian. So we are going to assume that we have k Gaussians because we'll also be connecting this to k-means at some point. So Zi will take a one value out of this set, right? It will be lower bounded by 1, upper bounded by k, and taking an integer value. And now probability that Zi takes value j will be defined as phi j, which is our model parameter that needs to be learned. And we'll be discussing that in lecture 7. And this is basically just a discrete distribution, right? Also called a categorical distribution for the latent variable. Now, let's see where the Gaussian comes in, right? We can now write the likelihood of this data xi conditioned on the fact that it was sampled from the jth distribution or the jth Gaussian. Okay, so this is the distribution, right? Or you can think of this also in terms of likelihood distribution of xi conditioned on this point being sampled from the jth Gaussian. And this is the notation we are going to use. P subscript j. So this subscript tells us the base distribution, right? The jth Gaussian, which is also the base distribution for us. And this xi is this point xi here, the probability density of xi or at xi. And we are going to assume that this distribution Pj is Gaussian with a mean vector mu j, covariance matrix sigma j. So mu j and sigma j are two additional parameters, right? Or it's a vector and a matrix respectively. So we need to learn these parameters as well. And that's something we'll again discuss in lecture 7. Okay. So in other words, what this is saying is once you condition on the fact that a point is chosen from, say, the jth base distribution, we are assuming that distribution to be Gaussian. And that is where the Gaussian, right, context in the mixture model comes into the picture. Otherwise, the mixture model can be general, right? We don't have to confine to Gaussians. Now, one quick note, why do we call this a mixture model, right? Just in case you are wondering, let me very quickly argue that. I think it will be useful for those of you who have not seen that before. And that is because we can write this probability distribution of xi conditioned on the model parameters. So theta are all the model. So it's just a vector that contains all the model parameters that I have described until now, right? The categorical distribution, all the mean vectors, the covariance matrices of all the Gaussians that we are considering, that they are all stacked in this model parameter vector. So we'll be defining this in lecture 7 again. Now you can write this equivalently as this expression, where what I did is I just used total probability theorem, right? I introduced this Zj here, and then just marginalized over that. And then I can write this also equivalently. This is a joint probability now. I can just write this as conditional times marginal, right? And this is sort of the form that I was looking for. This is the categorical distribution. And this is our base distribution, which we have assumed to be Gaussian, right? So you can now see that this probability here is nothing but a mixture, right? Or a linear combination of these base distributions, right? Base, B-A-S-E, base distributions, which are assumed to be Gaussians. We'll discuss again all this in lecture 7. I just wanted to sort of give a preview of what these mixture models are, in what context are we going to use it, and so on in this lecture, so that if you are interested, you can just glance through these before lecture 7. Okay, so let's visualize very quickly, right, what these Gaussian mixture models look like. So this is one illustration that I got from Kevin Murphy's book. So here we have a mixture model of 3 Gaussians. This on the right-hand side is the probability density function. On the left-hand side are the level sets or the contours of the corresponding Gaussian. So this mixture model is composed of 3 Gaussians, right? So k is equal to 3 here. And you can see that these level sets, right, they are sort of rotated. And this is where these Gaussian mixture models are so powerful, because you can design your covariance matrices to fit pretty much any data distribution that is given to you, right? So this is the difference. I don't really want to jump too much ahead of myself. This is the main difference between using these mixture models and doing something too simple like k-means, because k-means is making some assumptions about the underlying Gaussians, which will be clear from lecture 7, right? So it's assuming Gaussians to be spherical in some sense, which will mean something specific for our optimization functions, which we'll discuss in lecture 7. Okay, so before we conclude, right, now we have a, say, 10,000 feet view, say, of mixture models. We at least know what they are. The point is, can we now do clustering using mixture models? And the answer is yes. So once you fit the mixture model to the data, which is what we'll be doing in lecture 7, where we have these models of the mixture, the parameters of the mixture model, which will be learned from the data, right? And that is what we mean by fitting the mixture model. We can then compute the posterior probability that the point belongs to cluster J. And this is also called the responsibility of cluster J, defined as Rij, where I is your data point, J is the index of the cluster, which is, now this is just the probability that Zi is equal to J, right? That your point was sampled from distribution J, right? So this is conditioned on now the point and the model parameters. Right? Using Bayes' rule, you can write this as, in the numerator, this is just the categorical distribution, and this is just the Gaussian distribution, right? The jth Gaussian appears in the numerator. So we know how to write the posterior. And clearly, if this probability is high for a certain J, right, it gives us more confidence that this point indeed came from that Gaussian. And we'll discuss this in more detail. And this is, all these ideas are going to be very helpful when we discuss the expectation maximization, right? So this is soft clustering in the sense that we haven't assigned each point to a specific Gaussian, right? We are doing soft clustering or probabilistic clustering. We are saying that this point belongs to a specific Gaussian with a certain probability, right? We could also do hard clustering or this hard assignment by saying that once you know these probabilities, right, we are going to assign each point to a Gaussian, which is most likely given this probability, right? So the Gaussian that corresponds to the highest probability term here. So that is how we can do hard clustering using mixture models. Okay. So I'm almost out of time. So let me quickly summarize this extremely short lecture where we introduced the idea of unsupervised learning. Really, the focus was on k-means and one of its interpretations, because this is really what we need for what we are going to do in lecture 6. Okay. We also very, very briefly discussed Gaussian mixture models, but we are going to build on this discussion a lot more in lecture 7, where we'll discuss things like expectation maximization, density estimation, and those ideas will then be used in our case study on distributed learning in wireless networks, which will be our last lecture of the course. Okay, so all right, thank you so much for your attention. Please feel free to email me if you have any questions. Otherwise, I will see you in a little bit in lecture 6. Thank you.